Hello, welcome to Riot Act Reviews, the part of the Riot Act podcast, which you can listen to every Friday, doing alternative music things, where we pick an album of a significant profile from the upcoming release calendar, and we focus in on it, and we have a little poke around and see what's going on said album, and then we just leave, and we do nothing else. That's the show, basically. My name's Stephen Hill, as ever. He's Remfry Deadman. He's always here as well. Hello, Remfry. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling much better than you, I believe. You're feeling already. I'm sensing a bit of cough.
I did a stupid thing last week where I jokingly said, I'm going to 3 gigs, I'm going to 4 gigs and 4 nights in London, and I'll probably get COVID. And I'm pretty sure, I'm still testing negative at the moment, but I don't feel so good, Remfry. I've got to be honest. From sort of yesterday, which was Tuesday, if you're listening to this record, if you listen to this review when it goes out, it was Tuesday, the 30th of March 2022, 29th. To give it a proper 29th, sorry, to give it a proper timestamp. And I was like, oh God, I haven't been to a gig for 2 days and my throat's feeling a bit funny, and I'm stifling a few coughs here and there, but yeah. So I reckon it's on its way. It's on it. I feel like it's on. I can see it in the horizon. The old COVID. Hooray!
It's how mine started, so that'll be fun. But hey ho.
Yeah, hey ho. I mean, look, we soldier on, don't we? We soldier on. Today we are going to be looking at Immutable by Meshuggah, the 9th full-length album from the tech metal pioneering Swedish band, the follow-up to 2016's The Violent Sleep of Reason album. A very important band, Meshuggah, no doubt. In metal, a very, very important band. We spoke a lot about Meshuggah when we did a classic album podcast, which you can listen to if you go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/Riot Act Podcast. And we spoke about how impressive and important and unique and all those things Meshuggah were back in, the kind of the mid-90s through to the late noughties, really, was sort of where we went up to on that special. And they're a very important band, a very great and important band in metal.
It's literally, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say they are one of the most important bands in modern metal, certainly. When you consider the sheer amount of bands who have tried to rip Meshuggah off and have, done a decent enough impression, but has anyone really managed to hit the exact Meshuggah sound? I think it says an awful lot of Meshuggah that even now, even to this day, before Jens Kidman barks a single note or whispers a single note, that's right, you can tell it's Meshuggah straight away. You can, identity incredibly strong, weakened a little bit by the slew of pathetic copycats that have come in their wake. They're not all pathetic copycats. Not all the djent tech metal bands are rubbish, terrible copycats, but there's enough middling, quite bad bands in the world of tech metal for me to be like, poor Meshuggah. It has, I do think it has diluted their impact in the same way as Spineshank diluted the impact of hearing Korn for the first time. I do think that all these years later, I didn't really. Koloss was the first time. So Koloss from 2012, the follow-up to Obsen, I think we said at the time, was the first Meshuggah album where I was like, I don't love this. Do you know what I mean? I don't love it. I don't go, oh my God, this is so great. I just went, oh yeah, cool, Meshuggah. And then Violent Sleep of Reason, again, I think as we discussed on our classic album podcast, with a little bit of hindsight and time, I have gone, listen to it in isolation. I was like, yeah, that is a good album, obviously. But again, I didn't love it. Obsen still remains the one where they hit a point that I was like, this is fucking unbelievable. I love this so much. And they've not really made me feel like that in the intervening, we're 14 years shy of Obsen now, aren't we? Yeah. I don't strictly disagree with you. From the conversations that we have had, I feel like I'm a little bit more forgiving of Koloss and the Violent Sleep of Reason. Not to say that you've not forgiven Meshuggah for releasing those albums, but I think there are some tracks on those records which
are very like essential Meshuggah songs. But I will accept, I mean, there is a question to be raised, really, in that what more could we possibly expect Meshuggah to give us in 2022 in the studio environment? I should, caveat that with 35 years after they first formed. I mean, what more can we possibly ask from Meshuggah? They invented more or less an entire subgenre, which is more than most...
chiseled away at it and perfected it, I would say, in 2008.
Which is more than most bands do in their entire career. So I don't know, what do we want from a new Meshuggah album? It's difficult to say. It's difficult to know, really, what, because I do share what you're saying about it's difficult to get excited about a Meshuggah record these days, for me, because I don't know what else they have to give me. And it's interesting the way that I've read a fair few reviews of this record leading up to this, and it's interesting how people say that, like, they're constantly changing, constantly evolving, and it's the metal evolving thing, isn't it? Again, it's like I mean, if you put a microscope up to it, then yes, you can make arguments. You can make very technical, very quite boring arguments, I would say, that they have made advances on Koloss and the Violent Sleep of Reason, but they're not things that you really pay attention to when you're...
Or that have necessarily improved them as a band or a listening experience.
Yeah. I can't imagine many people would say Koloss is a better album than Obscene or The Violent Sleep of Reason. I don't think I've ever met that person.
No, me neither. And, I mean, a 6-year wait for an album means that for fans of this band, there's gonna be quite a lot, that people will be expecting from this record, purely because of the length of time that Meshuggah are now taking between records, right? I think when bands start taking this kind of gap, people get super excited for when they come back, and this must be, I'm sure, the longest gap between... it is, obviously. So 4 years between Contradictions, Collapse and Destroy, Erase, Improve, 3 years until Chaos Sphere, 4 years till Nothing, 3 years till Catch 33, 3 years till Obscene, 4 years to Koloss, 4 years of Violent Sleep of Reason, 6 years now for Immutable. So they're not the most prolific band in the world, Meshuggah. 4 years and 3 year gaps between albums and whatnot. Particularly back then, that was quite a, when you go back to the 90s, that's quite a gap. 91 to 95 from your debut to your second album is a pretty sizable gap, I would say. And it's much more common these days, but still, I think because of the cult fanatical fan base of Meshuggah and this being the longest gap, I think maybe expectations would be somewhat higher for this record from their fans. And that would make me think, with that bigger gap, I would like to think that Meshuggah would go away and take that time and go, after 2 albums of doing more of the thing that we've already sort of perfected, but to not as big a response or whatever, I would sort of think, I almost went into this going, it'd be interesting to hear this, because I wonder if Meshuggah have gone, we need to mix it up a little bit again. Just to try and mix things up a little bit. And like you say, I don't know exactly what that would or could sound like, but I was sort of hoping that they might find a different gear or a new flow or something. Do you know what I mean? So that's sort of what I was going into this album thinking.
I wonder if... I wasn't going to read this out, but I think in response, this quote from the press release is probably apt. For guitarist Martin Hagstrom, the task of embarking on another unprecedented tech metal odyssey was impossible to resist. For us, it wasn't all that clear that we were making a new album. We knew we could do it, but did we want to do it, he said. We had to decide, are we doing this or what else are we doing? After a long discussion, we agreed on certain things. We would make an album with as few restraints as possible. We would go in and try and make as cool an album as possible, have no anxiety about it, and see it as an opportunity. How do we make this a challenge that we feel like accepting and rising up to? Pretty quickly, we had a starting point. Everybody started to write, the ball started rolling, and suddenly we were sitting there discussing how many songs we were going to have to cut. So it kind of feels like it happened.
Not as many as you should have cut.
It kind of feels like it happened almost spontaneously. Like that there were no specific plans to make a record. They just got back in a room, and that is what ended up happening. So I suppose what you're saying there, what you set up there, I mean, I don't know if that was ever... I don't know. Was that ever Meshuggah's intention? I don't know. Maybe they didn't even know if they were going to do another record.
I mean, yeah, if they're going, we weren't going to have any limitations on it, but then, we ended up writing loads of songs just because it sort of flowed out of us, then I don't know. That's the having no limitations thing makes me think that's different to going, we actually actively wanted to do something different. Yeah. Having no limitations is like, if it happens to come up that we write a flamenco ballad, we'll put it in.
Yeah.
But going, we thought we've been doing this for a long time, let's not do things the same way. That's a completely different mindset. So it seems to me maybe that Meshuggah have gone, well, we won't have any limitations. We'll just see what happens. Oh, look what's happened. Yeah. It's another Meshuggah album.
One attitude is proactive. Let's proactively try and experiment and try and do something different. And the other one's a kind of less active. Just reactive. Let's see what happens. Not saying that either of those approaches is right or wrong necessarily. I guess you're just saying that you would have liked to have seen more of the former rather than the latter, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit. Only because Meshuggah are such a sort of revered and unique and special band, I think.
Yeah.
Is at this point, it's one thing to get a Lamb of God album and go, oh, Lamb of God were really good. And then they just kept making the same album for a few years. And they tried a few other little bits and bobs here and there. And some of them worked and some of them didn't work so well. But ultimately, we're just getting a kind of maybe a sort of slightly weathered, slightly slower version of maybe not quite as inspirational version of Lamb of God. But, that's fine. But when you get a band like Meshuggah who are like, these are the pioneers, they are the forward-thinking masters, and you think, well, they pioneered one idea, and they've just sort of gone, let's fucking hammer the shit out of this idea for 35 years. I mean, I love Meshuggah's back catalogue. I love their early stuff, and like I say, I absolutely love Obscen. But when we get into this record, which I think we might as well get into it now, I put the first track of this on. Broken Cog comes in and pretty much gives you exactly what you'd expect from Meshuggah. But good Lord, does it sound huge. It's a massive. Good 1 minute of a riff just going bonkers. And they sound fucking amazing. Like when they do this shit, they sound fucking amazing. But to me, it wasn't shocking or unreal or something that I didn't know how to get my head around. I was just like, okay, cool, here we go.
No, I mean, to be fair, just to pedal back ever so slightly, I mean, one of the stumbling blocks of getting into new Meshuggah is investment, because you have to put a lot more of yourself into a Meshuggah album than most records that you get. And when I loaded this up and saw it was 68, 69 minutes, however long it's a long record, and Meshuggah are a band who are tiring, like in the best possible way, I suppose, but well in a good way, I guess, but they can be quite exhausting. So I did think, how are they going to make that work over an hour and a bit? It's a hell of a tall order. I suppose the one thing I'll say before properly setting out on it is certainly it's not as intimidating a listen as its 69 minutes might suggest. And we complain that albums are too long all the time on this show, and Immutable is definitely too long.
It's their longest album by about 10 minutes as well, isn't it? Because Violent Sleep of Reason was 58 minutes and Koloss was 54 minutes, and Obson was 52 minutes.
Yeah.
And if we go back to like Chaos Sphere is 47 minutes. If we go back to Destroy, Erase, Improve, that's 46 minutes. And to me, like 46 minutes seems when you're on your fucking A game for a band. You go, well, that's why that's a classic. That's why people revere that album. You got 46 minutes. It's not only is it perfect and original, it's lean as well. Whereas this isn't.
Yes,
This just isn't.
I do agree with that. I will say though, I do think, when I sat down to listen to it first time, I was like, okay, this is going to be a bit of an ordeal, and it didn't feel as long as it was. I still think it's too long. But they employ some tricks further down the line, which we'll talk about when we get to them, that I think work and are good, but, it's still too long, basically. But certainly, when Broken Cog came in, I mean, I was fully on board. I was like, this sounds great. It's a little bit slower, a little bit more grinding, maybe, than what we're used to, but I don't actually think that's a bad direction for Meshuggah to go.
No, more stalking and reserved. And you get, like you said, Jens Kidman doing... Jens Kidman is like a kind of percussive instrument in the band, really, a lot of the time. And he does do this kind of croaky, whispering thing. He's usually a fairly one-dimensional variant. We spoke about Jens Kidman quite a lot when we did the Obson special. And his kind of punch kind of pneumatic drill approach to vocals, as if he is part of, like I say, as if he is part of the sort of the mechanics of the machine, which is cool, and I think it works for the band. But
it's like
it is good to hear him,
but in a good way.
It is good to hear him do something a little bit different. So I was like, okay, I appreciate that.
Assuming that's him, I read somewhere that I think it might be another member of the band, but
oh really?
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. Don't quote me on that. But it just occurred to me that
I just assumed it was. I've never heard Jens Kidman speak before.
Exactly.
All I've ever heard him do is go ga 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 ga, and
exactly.
like an angry seagull. The next song is fine. It sounded like Meshuggah. It was fine. I thought this is quite good.
I thought it was a brilliant riff.
The Abysmal Eye. Yeah,
I thought it was.
Well, this is what I'm going to say a lot. It is a brilliant riff. I'm going to say it is a brilliant riff a lot on this record.
Yeah.
In terms of things that are a little bit different, I think like the shortening of the fuse had a bit of a Dimebag Darrell style groove to it, but done in a Meshuggah style. Thought that was quite good. I thought Phantoms is cool. It's got a bit more of the sort of it feels a bit more palatable, like you mentioned, sort of.
Yes,
being a bit easier to kind of grasp. It felt
whilst we're on that motif, just a little sidestep. Quite a few of the reviews I've read have said that this is the most, the easiest Meshuggah album to get into.
Because they're used to listening to Meshuggah.
Could be, yeah, could be. I was going to ask your thoughts on that. Yeah, their most successful album.
Maybe. I mean, I still think if you've never heard them before and you put this on, you are going to be like, oh, fucking hell. Yeah. But all of those reviewers have heard loads of Meshuggah. And I think this is the point, isn't it? When I first heard Meshuggah, I went, no, don't know what this is. What the fuck is this? This is just like, I can't work out what's going on where, what the fuck. But now I know. Yeah. And so when I put it on, it does feel palatable. And all of those reviewers have been given that album because they've heard Meshuggah. But because you and I are better reviewers than them, Remfry, we're self-aware enough to know. No, well, I'll say it. All right, I'm a better reviewer than them then, since I pointed this out. They don't appear to be self-aware enough to realise that the reason that they feel that it's more palatable is not because it is more palatable. It's because they are more used to the core structure of Meshuggah, and that actually, rather than saying, oh, it's more palatable, so great, that's something different. Actually, what they should be doing is going, this isn't making me feel the way that their earlier material did. Are Meshuggah running out of ideas? And I think that, I don't think Meshuggah are completely out of ideas. Like I say, This is not some wild reinvention, but there are bits and bobs here. I think when you look at a band getting 9 albums into their career at this point in their career, maybe it's a little bit unfair to think that they should be doing something completely different. And there are little bits, like I said, I think Phantoms it's got a bit more bounce to it than, I wasn't shocked by it. And at this point, I was enjoying the album a lot. I was like, this is really good. I'm really, really enjoying this.
it got to God's He Sees and Mirrors where I was just thinking, this song is too long. The riffs seem to just go on and on and on and on forever towards the end of the song. And I was like, trim that down, lads. Like, I don't think you need that riff to just go on and on and on, particularly when you've got an album which is an hour and 7 minutes long. It just felt like it was going on too long. Do you know what I mean?
There's certainly... So the first 6 tracks, you could argue that all of the first 6 tracks are mid-tempo, groovy, Meshuggah stompers.
Mm-hmm.
And it totals 31 minutes and 37 seconds in total. And in terms of like coming out and hitting you with a signature Meshuggah sound, it absolutely achieves that. But I don't know if it needed to do it for 31 minutes and 37 seconds. I mean, I would have quite happily, maybe we would have changed the songs that we would have taken off, because there's nothing wrong with any of the songs particularly, but I was kind of like, you could probably just get rid of like the Shortening Fuse and Phantoms. Maybe you'd get rid of the Abysmal Eye instead, or Ligature Marks. It doesn't really matter, because I mean, to say they're all interchangeable is a very lazy, shitty thing to say, and I'm not going to go quite that far, but they are quite... They're all in the same realm, aren't they? Mid-tempo and Meshuggah stompers.
And I was, I was enjoying the record at this point.
So was
and
I.
31 minutes in, I thought... But that was when I got towards the end of that song, I was like, yeah, this does just feel like... I don't know. It's just the same... They say the same vibe, the same thing, going, like, and if it
I was willing for things to start changing at that point.
Well, I mean, I think they could have taken a leaf out of Korn's book and just ended the album there.
They could have done, yeah.
Or they could have got rid of a couple of those songs and then put in some of the stuff that in the second half of the album. There's actually really good stuff in the second half of the album.
It's great stuff,
but it's just fatigue to fuck. Do you know what I mean? Like fatigue to fuck. I mean, they followed that up with a song called They Move Below, which is a 9 minute and 58 second long instrumental.
Obviously, I love it.
In the middle of a Meshuggah album.
Mm.
I cannot tell you how scared I was of that song when I saw... I mean, for me, no.
Really?
No.
Oh, okay. I think it's one of the only reasons for this album to exist. Because I'm like, well, at least, like, I don't feel like I've heard Meshuggah do that for a long time. Certainly,
yeah,
possibly ever. You get 3 instrumental tunes on this record. It's, for my money, by far the best one. And it's quite good to have... I mean, it's difficult to talk about Jens Kidman without sounding like I'm being critical, and I'm not, but it is quite nice to have a break from him, like barking in your ear and stuff like that. And I actually thought that the way that track built up and stuff... I mean, that just the 2.5 minutes of clean guitars interweaving together was just like enough to make me go, oh, right, finally a bit of a breather. Yeah, and it could make me enjoy the rest of the record more. But I don't think They Move Us is simply a decent breather. I actually think it's one of the better songs in its own right. Personally.
It's way too long.
It probably is too long.
By about 6 minutes in, I was like, cool, they've really stretched this out, haven't they? And then, because I was the same as you, when those sort of quiet notes came in to begin with and they were doing something different, I was like, oh, it's going to be a little interlude. And then I was like, oh shit, it's the 9 minute long song. And I actually thought to myself, if they kind of remain in this place but do some weird, I thought maybe, they're all into jazz and stuff, aren't they? I thought maybe we spoke a lot about jazz on the Obson special, and like metal's relationship with it. And I thought to myself, if they kind of stay in this place and it's all clean and quite jazzy and intertwined and stuff, but then but it obviously it builds into something else, and at certain points it does. I go, okay, you're doing Meshuggah again. Do you know what I mean? You're doing Meshuggah. You're Meshuggah, and you got to tell everyone you're Meshuggah all the time. And I just thought actually those bits could have fucked off, because without Jens Kidman. Like, I know what you mean, it is nice to have a break from Jens Kidman, but it would have been just as nice to have a break from typical Meshuggah. Mm-hmm. But without Jens Kidman, it almost feels like, I don't know, it sort of did lack something as well. I think it made me realise that Jens Kidman is quite an integral part of that particular part of Meshuggah. I wouldn't want Jens Kidman going, oh, go, over the top of there's clean guitar parts. But I was like, you could, 9 minutes. I just thought to myself, it's fucking too long, this. And it's another example of, that whole, we're just going to see what happens. Well, too much is happening.
It certainly does. I mean, it does sound like the results of a Meshuggah jam, which is not usually... I don't think that's usually the way Meshuggah put their material together. And certainly, I mean, that is something which has gradually changed. I think a lot of reviews overemphasize how much it's changed. But there has been a more organic feel with the last few records, I think. And I think this album continues that. And I like that a lot. But I think... listening to you talk there, I think it would have been far more interesting to hear. Like I said, after 2.5 minutes, it goes into, like you say, typical Meshuggah again. It would have almost been more interesting to hear that clean part extended and added to and have more flourishes for like 6 minutes, and then the last 3 are Meshuggah going back. Kind of like a 10,000 Days, the way that that song by Tool builds over 11 minutes. It doesn't get like properly fucking heavy until the last sort of 2 or 3 minutes. And hearing Meshuggah do something like that would sound genuinely progressive.
Unusual.
Might be a tad too much, but different. Just a bit different.
They retreated back to the comfort of polyrhythmic jazz metal madness so quickly.
Exactly.
And then I was just like, and there's still fucking 7.5 minutes of this song left. Like, for fuck's sake.
I can
go straight back into. To be fair, they come back with the riff again. The riff on Kaleidoscope is banging, and it sounds like I can't quite put my finger on who it sounds like. What's the name of that? Oh yeah, Meshuggah. Yeah, it sounds like Meshuggah, right? It's good, but it sounds like Meshuggah, and there's a little bit of. But I liked it, but it sounds like Meshuggah. There's a little bit of black metal intro at the start of I Am Thirst, which then goes into that thing, but sounding like Meshuggah.
Well, the black metal intro thing is it's the second instrumental, it's Black Cathedral, and I was really my ears were peaked at that point because. Have Meshuggah done that black metal tremolo thing before? I'm not sure if they have. I was like, oh, this is a really interesting start to a song. And then it ends, and it's like, oh, right. So it's an idea that it's something you haven't done before, and it's an idea, but it's an idea that you've like not bolted onto a song, and it's not even. You described it there as an intro to the next song. It isn't really. It's got no connection with the next song at all. So I thought that was like a real.
Oh, I thought it did actually. I thought they kind of tried to interweave that kind of tremolo thing underneath the ba bum 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 like typical Meshuggah riff. I thought they at least tried to do that at the start. I don't know, man. I mean, the Fault again. Absolutely amazing riff on the Faultless. Amazing riff. The riff it actually sounds a little bit like. Three Little Pigs by Green Jelly. I thought that and the Discord sort of guitar stuff over the top of it is cool when the riff comes in and then Yen starts shouting and then like, but it is good. Do you know what I mean? It is good.
I'm just gonna say I think The Faultless is one of the best songs on this album, but it took me, I think it was like my 4th listen through to the record before I even noticed it, because when you're listening to the album it comes in at the 52-minute mark, which is normally when I'd be saying to bye-bye to a Meshuggah record, because that's enough. But like listening back to it, and I do actually think it is one of the best songs on the record. I think if it had been track 3 it would have really popped, but I think it's really good to leave highlights later on in the record. It's quite annoying when records are
front-loaded.
Front-loaded, thank you. But
we're going to be talking about Smash by Offspring later. And
that
album is fucking front-loaded, man.
Yeah. But it felt a little bit too little too late. I mean, it is fantastic.
It's a great song. This is an album full of moments. I mean, the
Yeah.
sort of cacophony of noise at the start of Armies of the Preposterous
Yeah.
is so brilliant.
Yeah, it is.
Right? It's so amazing. But I don't think the song itself is particularly amazing. I think the riff and the noise is great. I think The Faultless actually is probably my second favourite song on the whole album, actually.
What's your
after
favourite?
Probably Broken Cog,
Cog.
just because it's the first one that comes in. And I was like, hooray, Meshuggah. I'm not bored of this yet.
What's your favourite song on the album? The first one I play.
The first one, yeah, the one that hasn't exhausted me yet. And then they put the slow thing at the end. Metal bands. Why do you do the same thing all the time?
Another slow instrumental. It's quite nice though. Past tense
quite
again.
nice.
It's like, again, at least it's a different side of Meshuggah. I think they have done that brooding clean guitar. They have done that brooding clean guitar thing before, but at least it's like something different to end the record. So I'm fine with it. But yeah.
Broadly speaking, this isn't a bad record, but Meshuggah have become a band that I am impressed with, rather than the band that actively move me, that I actively enjoy.
Yeah.
And I've got to be honest, I'm not even that impressed by this album. Not even that impressed by it. I think if it gets to the point where you're just like, oh, actually, this isn't really doing much for me, but I tell you what, it is incredibly impressive, so I'm going to listen to it on that level. There's nothing here that I haven't heard Meshuggah do before, so I'm not actually even that impressed. If you're going to do the same thing for sort of the entirety of your career, and I don't think it is fair to compare Meshuggah to the type of bands who I'm about to compare them to, but AC/DC do the same song all the time. The Ramones do the same song all the time. The song they do is a great song, a fun fucking song. It's a fucking great fun song, right? Meshuggah are not a fun band. They're not a fun... Do you know what I mean? You don't go, I just need more kind of I need 12 more 3-minute long rock and roll sort of bawdy pub rock songs because they're just a laugh. I can kind of understand that. You know, I need 14 more 2-minute long scrappy punk sort of Beach Boys meets Sex Pistols-y boppers. I can understand that with the Ramones and with AC/DC. I kind of understand that they're making the same record over and over again. They can still sound cool and still sound good, because that type of music just lends itself to, this is straight in my head straight away. But the amount of investment you have to put into an album like this, I think, is still a lot, because Meshuggah are complex. They are very, very complex. Definitely. And they are very complicated by design. But when it doesn't shock you or move you or blow your mind in the way in which they have done previously, I think it's very, very difficult to get excited about new music by Meshuggah. I think it's very, very difficult to get, when I first heard this, my first listen through to it, I was like, I think I'm going to shit on this album. I think I'm going to come in and go, just fucking stop making records. If this is all you've got, stop making records. And I do like it a lot more now than I did when I first listened to it. My first listen through to it, I just thought, fuck me. By the end, I was so bored. I was so fucking bored off my tits by this record. And I do think that listens down the line, like 5-6 listens down the line to it, I certainly feel like I've got a better handle on it. But I also feel that it's an album of great moments. It's not an album of great songs. It's not an album that can justify anywhere near its insane running time. 1 hour and 8 minutes, 1 hour 7 minutes, however long it is, over nearly an hour and 10 minutes of material from a band who've been around a long time, who aren't really doing that much with the sound that they have created decades ago. I just don't think it can justify its length. I don't actually think that it is the most it's not the most focused Meshuggah album. It's not them firing on all cylinders. It is because they are such a good band, there are plenty of moments on this album where you go, fucking hell, man, this band are great. They are fucking great. But in comparison with what's come before it, this does not hold a candle to their best. It is a long way from an Obson or a Nothing. It is a long, long, long way from that, I think.
I do agree with everything you have said, but less vociferously, I would say. So I like this album much more than you do. Honestly, despite its flaws, and it is flawed, that you could shave a good 15 minutes off it. I reckon. I think Immutable is my favourite of the last 3 Meshuggah records.
Me too. I was about to say it's still my favourite of the last 3.
Right, okay. I think I don't really know. Yeah, to piggyback onto that point, I don't really know what I want from a new Meshuggah album these days, because I know that they are not going to push things as far as I want them to push them. And their fan base as a whole appear to be totally satisfied with them continuing to do this. And that is, it satisfies me, but it doesn't excite me, I guess. I feel like as a studio band, they've probably given me all that they are going to. I'm still going to go and see Meshuggah live pretty much every single opportunity I get. I mean, I am quite excited about seeing moments from this record at the Royal Albert Hall, for example, with zeal and ardent support. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm still absolutely going to that show.
Oh, yeah.
But going in with that mindset of like, what can Meshuggah give me really now in 2022 from a studio album? I was surprised at how much I enjoyed Immutable, and for that and that alone, I would give it a big tick.
What would you give it if you were rating this out of 10? We don't really do that, but if you were, what would you give it?
Oh man, that is so hard.
They're kind of arbitrary marking points anyway, ultimately, aren't they? I think it's just because lots of people do it. I mean, you probably don't need us to, I wonder what they think about this album. If only they'd give it a mark out of 10 at this point. We sort of said what we think.
The reason it's hard is because the fact remains that Meshuggah are ahead of the majority of their contemporaries.
Yeah.
So I feel like within the scene as a whole, as a tech metal album, this is like, an 8 for me. But for a Meshuggah album, it's kind of like in a kind of wanting to push them more, I would say it's called sort of a 7. But that's why, scoring. But even that doesn't feel very satisfactory.
Here's the difficult balancing act, I think, with Meshuggah at this point. I even think, like, when I go back to the first, like, Combustion, the first track on Obscene, right?
Yeah.
Which is my favourite album of theirs.
Yeah.
Fucking incredible. Sounds incredible. The savage production's amazing. But it's a song as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, it feels like, I talk about a lot about, there being songs in it and stuff. And I sort of listen to this album, and like I say, it's an album full of moments, an album full of riffs, it's an album full of parts, it's an album full of things that I go, oh, this is really cool, that's really great, or stuff. But there's not, with the exception probably, I mean, I would actually say The Faultless is probably the closest thing you get to a complete sounding song on the record, that I don't just go, well, that's not just a riff that you kind of base a whole thing around. I think Broken Cog actually as well does enough stuff for it to be, sort of looked at as a complete piece. But so much of it feels like disjointed ideas of bits that can be great bits, like I say, Armies of the Preposterous, or that kind of Dimebaggy riff in Light of the Short and Fuse. Like there's plenty of moments on it where I go, what a fucking great moment, but there's not any kind of complete songs that all the way through I go, oh, there's that bit that goes into that bit. The kind of the journey and the transitions and the kind of the craft that you get within great songwriting. There's not a lot of that in there. And people might go, well, it's Meshuggah, they don't really do that. But they have done that in the past. They are capable as a band of doing that. I think Combustion is one of the best examples of that, to be honest. I think that really feels like a song where what's coming, even though it's really complex, and it feels
like it has a verse and a chorus. It feels like
verse, chorus,
parts.
and parts. It feels like everything is kind of it sort of traverses the journey of that track. Feels far smoother. Like, some of these bits are like, where did that come from, or why is that, or you're doing that and you've just kind of chucked that in. And we were speaking about Bring Me the Horizon the other day in their first album. I mean, I'm not comparing Bring Me the Horizon and Meshuggah really, but I do think that this album does appear to be quite a bunch of moments rather than than actually quite a good group of songs. And I think when those moments work, they're fucking amazing. Like Meshuggah do some things that I don't think any of those other bands are capable of. I don't think there's most of the bands that I'm going to talk about wouldn't be capable of that fucking cacophony, that flurry of just noise and rhythms that Army of the Preposterous brings in, right?
Yeah,
I don't think they would. But I do think Periphery write better songs than them at this point.
I
do think Tesseract have a better understanding of what makes a song work than Meshuggah do on this record, right?
Songcraft.
And I know again, like that's not really Meshuggah's strong suit. It's not really their purpose. But I do think when you say like tech metal, it's you know, like it's just sort of what we said at the start. You know, tech metal was, you know, a snake eating its own tail, and it's copied Meshuggah to the point where no one else can compete with it. I think the elements that sort of were born of tech metal, nobody's bettered Meshuggah from the kind of the distilled base element of that. But in terms of taking that idea and taking it into other places, actually there have been quite a lot of bands who have gone, well, this is the starting point, but let's shave it off a bit and make it more palatable and actually kind of sell it as a poppier version of that. I mean, you know, the other band who kind of came through as a big influence on djent would be Sixth, right? And when you look at what Sixth sounded like on maybe not so much the last album, but the EP that they put out when they first came back, and some of the things that they threw in, you know, when they said adjusted in the band compared to like the Hold My Finger EP that I got way back in the day, the difference is massive, absolutely massive, like really massive. And Sixth, just as unpalatable in a lot of ways as Meshuggah, but a much better understanding of hooks, a much better understanding of how to sort of slow things down and make them more, make them work in grander environments and stuff. And I think actually, weirdly, at this point, I sort of look at Sixth and I go, you probably weren't as original as Meshuggah, but you seem to have had a more interesting evolution as a band.
I think I agree with a lot of that. I think you know, I think when you're talking about like what is a song and what isn't, again, you know, I'd probably go back to my kind of thing of like, well, what really makes up a song? A lot of what Meshuggah do is taking a riff and basically exploring every single facet of it and repeating it over and over again, and it's subtly changing. It's a minimalism approach. I mean, people might balk at the term minimalism when we're talking about a band like Meshuggah, but that is actually exactly the approach that they take with a lot of their material. It's taking one thing, one element, and wringing as much out of that element as you possibly can, to the point where it's like a little bit too much. You know, that has always been Meshuggah's main thing. And I actually think songs like Combustion are the you know, the exception to the rule, even if you look back at Meshuggah's career as a whole. And I'm just not sure if they're interested in doing that.
They're probably not, but I think you know, there's a fluidity to Meshuggah at their best, which is not present on this record. They used to move through the gears on that one riff. They could move through the gears into different places very seamlessly at their best. And I do think there is, maybe it's them being so open to changes and everything that they're like, oh, we're going to go over here, we're going to forget. But there's a kind of a bit of a disjointed, slightly unfocused feel that sort of permeates through this record, I think. And I think it's a bit like, you know, it seems weird to say it about Meshuggah, it's a bit sloppy. You've allowed it to be 1 hour and 7 minutes long. It's not your best material, and yet you still put out your longest ever album. That to me is that's a sloppy thing to do. That's, you know, the kind of the precision and care and craft that went into those albums that were 46, 52 minutes long, that are your best material, that are full of your best material. You know, where's that mindset that everything needs to be precise, and like it's not here as much on this record, because this record is, again, like I say, it's a record full of great moments surrounded with some, you know, I think some quite shoddy, sloppy ho-hum stuff that we've heard before.
When you say sloppy, you mean excess stuff rather than
Yeah,
sloppily played
yeah.
or anything like
Not-
that. Because
I mean, no,
obviously,
not-
to be clear,
not-
the playing
no.
on this album is phenomenal throughout.
Yeah,
but yes,
it's
I
not
understand
not
what
in
you
that
mean.
way,
Yeah.
but in terms of like, that there's a bit of that'll do.
Maybe, I don't know. I mean,
They know what they're doing, don't they? The thing is that they absolutely know what they're doing, and sometimes you know what you're doing to the point where you just. It must be hard being in Meshuggah because, like that quote at the start, I reckon you get to the point where you can't see the wood from the trees, and it's like, as long as we're going ba 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 da ba da ba 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 da ba 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 da ba ba, then it's good, and that's what people want. And people pat them on the fucking head so much for just going ba 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 for so long that maybe they just go, yeah, that's what people like. This is great. This is great. We need to have this in. And I think a little bit more judicious kind of, is this actually any good? Is this actually making this song better? Does this need to be an hour and 10 minutes long?
Yeah.
Would have made for a much better record, I think.
Well, Meshuggah are certainly critical darlings, and there's very few people who are willing to say that a new Meshuggah record is, not that great or anything. And I actually think that a lot of the time the reason for that is because there's a perception that, you have to be quite smart to get Meshuggah, and it's almost kind of like a, oh yeah, I get it kind of thing, and if you don't like it as much as me, then you just don't get it. Whether that happens in the professional world or not, I couldn't possibly say. But yeah, I mean, I do agree with everything you're saying up to a point. I don't feel it as strongly as you, like you say. Am I happy for Meshuggah to continue releasing an album every 6 years, for the next, I don't know, maybe 2 more records, maybe 3 more records? That would be fine with me, because the one thing I will say about Meshuggah, which we haven't pointed out yet, is at least they're not shitting on their legacy. There's a lot of bands.
This is true.
There's a lot of bands who get 35 years in and they release albums, and you just go, oh, please don't do that, because you're making me like you less, or you're ruining my passion for the older material or whatever. And Meshuggah have never done that, and considering that they are 35 years in, I think that's something that we should absolutely acknowledge. And even as difficult and as dull as this album might get at points, it's never bad or embarrassing. It's never badly performed. I understand what you're saying about like the way that the record's put together and it doesn't flow very well and all that sort of thing. I do agree with those things, but the actual record is not like ever bad, is it?
No, I mean, hardly the headiest of praise for such a revered band.
No,
it's never bad.
no.
Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I agree with that. It's not doing that. They're not Megadeth or Anthrax. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I completely agree with that. But look, like I say, there are some fucking awesome bits on it. I probably do prefer it to Koloss and Violent Sleeper Reason, but I don't have loads of sort of particularly massively positive things to say about that record. I just think it's difficult, and credit for being pioneers in the first place. But yeah, kind of eventually, I guess if you pioneer that thing and it's your identity is so strong, it's very, very difficult to. Yeah, it's just difficult, isn't it? It's difficult to kind of keep yourself sounding really vital and essential for years and years and years and years when you are mining that same thing over and over again. I guess that's sort of where we are with it. But it is decent. But put it this, here's another way that I would say looking at it. Right, I've already mentioned Korn. That last Korn album, what was it? 9 tracks, 30 minutes long.
Something
right?
like that. Yeah.
Something like that, right? And if that album had been 1 hour and 7 minutes, I think we'd have savaged it.
Yes, probably.
I think we'd have gone, this is a bad idea. At this point in their career, again, bands, less is more. Less is more. Like Meshuggah, if Obson didn't need to be an hour and 8 minutes long, this doesn't need to be an hour and 8 minutes long.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So anyway, but look, if you like Meshuggah and you just like bap, 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 and you're probably going to fucking love this shit. You're going to have a fucking absolutely lovely time, because it is, it is a good album. It's just an album that maybe should have ended sort of 25 minutes before it actually does. So,
I'd say 15,
there you go.
You say 25. I think that's where we are on it, isn't it? Like, that's me liking it slightly more than you. But
I to be honest, if it was 35 minutes long, I think that would be fucking ideal. I started getting bored half an hour, but by the end of track 6, I was like, I kind of need this to stop now. And to be fair, they mix it up a little bit after that, as discussed. But I reckon had they have cut 2 of those first 6 songs and swapped them with some of the latter stuff, and maybe even whacked that instrumental in, maybe turn that 10-minute instrumental into a 7-minute long instrumental and put that out as an album, 35, 37 minutes, I think that would have, I'd have got that and gone, fuck me, this is brilliant.
Yeah, same.
So there you go. 6 out of 10 for me. I reckon.
Very harsh.
I think that's pretty nice, actually. Anyway, there you go. Immutable by Meshuggah comes out on Friday, which is the 1st or the 2nd of April.
Yeah.
1st of April. April Fools, everyone. You're a bloody fool if you listen to this and don't listen to our podcast, Riot Act, on Friday, which comes out as well. So we'll see you then. We'll be talking about various things. I can't even remember what now. I'm going to go and blow my nose. See you later.